Hi, Matt Bain. Good to see you.
Good afternoon. Good to see you too, Karna.
Yeah, I'm excited about this talk. We're going to talk a little bit today about the importance of connectiveness and how athletes, coaches, volunteers are staying connected. Some examples, I'm assuming, or some
hmm
examples of how they could be.
hmm Yeah, I think. Well, I mean, there's it has a far reach, I guess. So I'm going to say when we look at what's going on as far as the bigger picture and the physical distancing, we use the term and immediately everybody jumped on it, the social distancing, but the physical distancing is just keeping space between people. But what we're realizing, there's a lot of things that we do in that space, even if it's 6 feet, 8 feet, 10 feet apart, that are really valuable. And when people shift their attention away from that time that they have with people, there's a lot of, we talked about it earlier, there's a lot of loss that maybe we don't even recognize. And that brings to the forefront of a lot of emotions for people, maybe in ways that they didn't anticipate, or that they start to reach out and their needs aren't being met the same way. And
Hmm.
so now we zoom in sort of on the importance of team and the importance of maybe a lot of organic processes that are just kind of present without really thinking about them when we show up for practice, or we show up for competitions, or we show up at dry land, or we show up for meetings, or we get together for a training on a Saturday. Those are the things that just kind of went poof for a lot of people. And so I can't kind of what we want to look at today is just maybe what is in the poof, but also ways that we can bring maybe back up a little bit and bring some bring cohesion back, right?
Hmm.
Bring the importance of cohesion and understanding of cohesion, and how that relatedness or connectedness can kind of return.
Yeah, absolutely. And for everybody, not just athletes and coaches, but parents that are used to chasing their kids around with other parents and so on and so forth. Everybody's really been affected because essentially nobody's doing anything right now unless they are finding new ways to connect. And have you seen some examples of way people are connecting?
I think the way people are connecting has been neat or interesting, is the features it all on social media is where we're finding either skill or competence ways of connecting. You see like volleyball, or the passing back and forth to players in lots of different locations, or soccer, or football a little bit as well. You've also seen it, like I've seen it, I guess I follow a lot of swimming as well as kind of a swim coach. You follow a lot of swimming, and the idea that the athletes are doing the dryland training, and it's not just that they're doing the training, that they're identifying their training and finding fun ways to do activities that bridge to their teammate or their peer who's across the city, or too far away to be able to visit with. That they're doing something that both can identify as important to the sport and really kind of brings home that athletic identity. I think the kind of ways that I've seen parents doing it would be in some similar ways, without I guess delving too deeply into those kinds of things. It's that they're doing a lot of the things that they would ordinarily do on the trips, right? So they're playing crib, or they're getting together for the social time, and they're watching a hockey game. The Oilers won the Stanley Cup, and so a whole bunch of people are getting together like they would have been when, if they're watching their children play, kind of heading into playoffs or just out of playoffs, bridging to spring sports, changing to spring sports, doing the same thing with baseball. So we've seen lots of people identifying the activity that they would ordinarily be doing together, and then finding creative ways to do that. And that's kind of the resiliency of thinking, that future thinking a little bit, but more in the here and now. What am I missing? I'm missing sitting beside my friends, the Smiths, or I'm missing seeing my 6 teammates or my 8 teammates that I roll into practice with at 5 in the morning. No more 5 in the morning practice. And then they go, but I really miss my 5 a.m. practice. Like, those are conflicting messages,
Right, yes,
right?
definitely.
But it brings to the forefront all of these kinds of things that just maybe weren't conscious for a lot of people.
Yeah. Definitely. So obviously people are interested in this because Paige had posted online if anybody had questions, and we had 5 questions come through, which
Yeah.
I think is really really interesting and some really specific questions that I'm sure we'll touch on all together. We're not going to spend all day talking about it, which we could, but
Mm-hmm.
we know that some people are connecting online, obviously, but some people are still having struggles with it. One of the first questions is, how can we help the athletes through the realization that they lost an entire season, especially after training for months to be ready? We touched a bit on this about athletes and dealing with the loss and the anger of losing a season,
Mm-hmm.
right? I think with that conversation, we talked a lot about acknowledging that the anger, right? Not
Right.
just, telling somebody that you can't be angry. I know you're angry, and you have every right to be angry,
Mm-hmm.
um, and maybe facing it just dead on for something like
Mm-hmm.
that. Um, and then more so for this topic today, we have what can we expect, or how can we prepare our children when the season is reopened to properly integrate them back into the team socialization aspect of sport? That's a good one. So
Mm-hmm.
this is obviously how can we prepare? So we're not connecting right now, this parent is saying, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do we prepare them if, number one, we don't connect through the season at all and they get back? Or are there ways that we can prepare maybe without the initiation of maybe the organization or the coach to help with
Mm-hmm.
that socialization?
Well, and I think one of the important things that came up for me in that question, Karna, was the age of the athletes, right? Like, for instance, if I have say a gymnast who would go year round, but there would be sort of a dissolution of competitive season throughout the summer, and there'll be a little bit more relaxed kind of approach to things, then they've already sort of experienced a little bit of that depressurization when it comes to competition.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when they sort of start to apply or amp things up again, it almost is as a fluid kind of process for themselves. But if they really look at the window of, like, I train 3 times a week or something like that during the summer, or whatever it is, then they're looking at what they're doing with the other 4 days. And those days, they have some skills that are already in place there. And I think it's important to recognize that, okay, if I have those 4 days where I'm not in the gym or something like that, then what am I doing with my time? I'm probably not sitting around worried about the next day, or in 2 weeks, or in 4 weeks. So I'm I'm able to be present. I'm able to be kind of in here and now. I can focus on what I can do in that moment. I think one of the other factors that comes up for me is like team tryouts. And, I've always sort of, been kind of curious with the idea of forming teams and those kinds of things in team tryouts. Is It's kind of like the idea of beginning the year in a school year with an exam, right? We're placing a great deal of emphasis and pressure and performance pressure in a very short window period of time. And we're asking athletes to perform at the very best for a short period of time to define an entire year. And if that's kind of where our thinking is, then it emphasizes kind of one of the facets that came in the first question, which is the training part. Like,
Mm-hmm.
the athlete that's been training all year for the season and they don't get their season, they're looking, okay, I didn't get that season, but I'm going to continue to train,
Mm-hmm.
right? Is that I shift my attention back to and question, whether I've lost my sport or whether I've lost my identity. And the sport isn't who you are, it's what you do and how you train, and how you commit to how you want to perform, and those kinds of things. That's really where we start to put the emphasis. And so the underlying kind of psychological variables there for both of those questions are things like commitment and determination and discipline. And those are all acquired and built
Right.
psychological traits. They're not automatically there. They're not either or, all or nothing thinking. And so for an athlete to really go, okay, I'm going to stop projecting into the future and just be in the present and kind of do the control what I can in the moment, they
Right.
probably take a little bit of that worry away.
Totally. So let's say I do have a kid or an athlete, right, that is committed, right? They have no problem. They've been doing it for long enough. They can put together programs, whatever. They're not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily looking at that. What if they are disconnected? Like if I
Mm-hmm.
don't have a coach that is reaching out,
Right.
right? What if my kids disconnected completely from their team, or they see themselves in isolation? What are some
Mm-hmm.
of the things that as a parent I can do to help try to keep my kid connected with that team or the sport in a bigger picture? Or
Mhm.
what can that look like for me?
I think like when I think of a concept like that, I'd look back a little bit on the contact and communication that did have with the coach.
Right.
For a for a for an idea like that, I would just ask the questions like, what made this team great? You know, ask the coach what made this team great. Ask the players what made this team great. Because
Hmm.
if it's a transition year, say the athlete's leaving band and going to midget or something like that, then they may not be still in an intact team. But that
Right.
doesn't mean that the players themselves can't remain intact, because they will likely still be bridging to the next level with some of the players.
Yeah.
So when you're talking to a coach, the coach can be the one who's going to draw attention to the great things about the team. And then the players themselves can be the ones to conceptualize how they make those connections that they had as a team. Like, I
Hmm.
look at the definition of collective efficacy, and you know, when you conceptualize collective efficacy, it has very, very little to do with what the group is doing and
Hmm.
more to do with how the group performs.
Right.
And so if how the group performs, if they were, you know, very focused, if they were dedicated, if they, you know, enjoyed, you know, conversations, then it's okay. Those were the things that really made this team great. What can we do, or how can we do those things today? And I think that's been happening already a little bit,
Hmm.
um, in kind of neat organic ways. But there's a reason why people are going, oh, I want to be part of that, right?
Right.
Um, I think the next step too is to really start to bridge to some of the people you follow at the next levels. Something that a lot of athletes already do is, you know, get on social media, follow the, you know, if they're hockey, they're following the dub, or if they're in, you know, playing football, they're
Hmm.
following, you know, NCAA players or CI or U sports. I can't struggle with the U sports term, but
Right.
you
I
know,
hear
they
you.
follow U sports athletes and teams,
Yeah.
and so it's finding connectedness that way that keeps their goals, their dreams, you know, their short-term 1 year, 3 year, 5 year goals in mind at a time when they're really starting to lean on themselves.
Right.
Um, you know, that's the part to me where that shouldn't disappear because our physical time together did.
Yeah.
And we need to think differently about it, and that's
Hmm.
okay. We have that resilience, we have that ability. It's just
Hmm.
a matter of whether or not we can get ourselves to that place and set those goals.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. What also came to me when you were talking is I think that a lot of people like to follow the rules of the hierarchy, right? Generally, things
Mhm.
go through the coach. And if the
Yeah.
coach isn't doing anything to keep things social, maybe because the coach isn't confident with being online or the skills, computer skills, doesn't have access to computer, who knows, it could be a multitude of things.
Mhm.
Um, does it always have to go through the coach? Like, let's say, and does it always have to be sport related? For example, if my kid is already committed, right? I have a coach that's not, that I love, or maybe I don't like, doesn't matter, neither here nor there, but they're not
Mhm.
engaging right now with their membership or their athletes.
Yeah.
My kid wants to stay connected with their athletes. Am I out of place to create something if it's socially? Like, I can reach out to the coach maybe, and then I can host, let's say, some sort of weekly gathering as a parent, right? And I can host it or help like facilitate it so that this club can get together, right? I'm not
Mhm.
training, I don't have any knowledge around this sport, but maybe
Mhm.
there's an opportunity for everybody to get together and like share feelings. It doesn't matter to me. They could share recipes for all I care, but
Yeah.
just, can I do that? Am I within my right to do that as a parent?
Well, think about the idea, and sport is, I think, one of the particularly good communities in this sense is that when a coach has a supportive parent group, every coach in this community, or barring most every coach in this community, would say, "Man, is my job that much more smooth?" So, really, what they're asking those parents often to do is the social cohesion elements that are involved in effective team management, and those social cohesion elements are what we would be depending on right now. And
Totally.
so if it's not in something organic in a way of like, oh, we're going to get a team dinner together, there's
Hmm.
nobody says you can't have a team dinner.
Yeah.
Like that, like, and so
Yes.
that's the thing where we bridge it to nutritional information, to the kids trying this, to,
Right.
you know, the parents backing them up, to everybody getting together. Does it look different? Yeah, absolutely. But look outside. That looks different too. And
Hmm.
the look different part is the part of going, okay, it looks different. It doesn't mean I have to keep the same thinking.
Yeah.
this is an awesome opportunity for us to become a whole lot more cognitively flexible and really start to, in my words, empower those younger people and those leaders on your teams, because usually they're just harboring these 27 great ideas. They're just waiting for someone to go, oh, what do you think? And some may be inappropriate. Others will come into the boundaries of appropriate.
Yeah.
And then you go, let's do this. This would be so much fun. And boom.
Yeah, totally.
Right. And the group is off and running.
I think a lot of us are rule followers, but also there's etiquette. Sport comes with etiquette, and sport comes with hierarchy. So I don't want to overstep. So I think some parents or even athletes need the permission, and maybe that's a conversation with the coach saying, hey, this is an idea. Do you want to join, or do you think it's a good idea? Right. And bouncing off. And I don't blame coaches. Coaches can't be everything. Right?
Yep, I agree.
Just because
100%.
you know sport and you are kick-ass at that sport doesn't mean that you know how to throw a Zoom party at home. Like, you don't have to be the best at everything. And I think it takes a real team. And that's the special thing about sports, I think. So
one more layer to that too, Karna, and I talk about it with leadership is, an effective or good leadership is an opportunity to lean on not just the sport performance for having a voice in the locker room or just prior to competition, but having a voice when it comes to the connectedness of the team. And so if the coach isn't particularly effective at those kinds of things, they likely were doing that anyway. Like, what do you guys think? Or, what do you girls think about this challenge? Or how about something like this? Like, oh yeah, that'd be totally cool. Let's do that. And then they go off in wildfire. And the coach was already doing it.
Right.
Likely most coaches, are doing this, especially involved in adolescent developmental sport, that they're doing these kinds of things already. It just looks a little differently.
That's right.
I think it's important to acknowledge, though, that not every player is in the same mental and emotional place. And so it's okay that if, Grande is a little bit more removed and usually she's all in, or, going back to our first talk, is just acknowledge where the athlete is and allow them to come in and dip the toe in as they will, right?
Yeah. I love that. Actually, that's a great point of view. And you know what? Just because the first time you guys do it, there's only 2 of you online, doesn't mean that there's not a place to continue to do it, right? Because again, we're all like matching our schedules, but also our comfort levels and where we are mentally, right? Some people at 3 weeks are way different than their mental health or their state, and at 6 weeks, and we could be in this for months.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
So just holding that space for sure.
Well, I think it takes a little bit more of a broader approach to the idea that we're not just representing our own team, but we're often representing our sports, right? Sport organizations themselves can't be the ones to organize, 1,500 hockey players, or, they can't do those kinds of things. But what we can do is we can see, okay, like, I'm the coach of one, soccer team, and I know that the coaches of 8 other soccer teams. It's like, okay, so what are you guys doing? What are you doing with your teams? How are you doing this with your teams? And starting to reach out and use that community as well, because we still do advocate for the bigger picture of our sports. And I think this is kind of one of those milestone moments where you get to really look at, is the sport most important, or are the people most important? Now, the people play the sport, and that's how our worlds connect.
Right.
But those people are always, and probably always should be, the number one priority when it comes to our performance as coaches. So we get an opportunity to kind of take that meta cognitive look at our role within sport and enhance those relationships with those kids, regardless of whether or not we'll see them next year. Right.
Yeah.
Soapbox away. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no, but actually I quite like that. And it made me think about the coaches, some coaches that feel comfortable with this kind of formatting, right?
Yeah.
Leaning on each other within the organization. Because if you're looking at a whole soccer organization, there's several coaches. There's no rules that, just because I belong to the U13 boys team, that I can't be in an online discussion with, X, Y, and B team as well, right? So like just opening up the context a little and kind of creating a larger umbrella will position the kids to be more socially connected once the doors start opening, no matter what that looks like. Once we get back to the field of play, we don't know what that's going to look like, but it'll be an easier transition for the kids, for the parents, and for the organizations.
Definitely. Yeah, I agree.
Now, okay, I hate having to look at my screen like this, but these are some good questions. My
Mm-hmm.
child has wanted to chat with teammates while in isolation, but no one on his team or their parents want to make their time or effort to schedule a FaceTime call or or any form of appropriate socializing. How can I help him engage with his team better? That's interesting because we
Mm-hmm.
just touched on that, obviously.
Yeah.
But uh, does it have to be the whole team? And why, and for these parents, can it be just one player on the team and start from there? I don't
I
know.
I think the just like any social cohesion or social activity that occurs in a team, the open invitation exists, and the idea that we're going to be building something this way or that way is not this is the only way,
Mm-hmm.
right? And as soon as two or three people start reaching out, and depending on the age of the kids, I think the parents can be involved a little bit more at younger ages, maybe the kids a little bit older ages more involved,
Mm-hmm.
but I think the idea of the reach versus the execution and starting the dialogue so that when the time comes, like, hey, brainstorm, is it going to be better if we do, a potluck Zoom thing, or if we do,
Mm-hmm.
if we do just a team games thing or
Mm-hmm.
whatever, it doesn't matter what it is. It just matters that we're starting to connect about it.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll see. I mean, that's probably one of the neatest things about social media is all it takes is to start to tag and connect people,
Mm-hmm.
and they go, oh, and next thing you know, they're off and running. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
one of the
Yeah.
things I just finished with is on Facebook is like post 10 albums in 10 days in music, and a favorite album that had to do with your life. You don't explain it, you just put it out there. And
Mm-hmm.
the number of people that I just connected with just based on that activity, just one, click album
Yeah.
cover, and all of a sudden, like, it's
Mm-hmm.
cool because you're all of a sudden a part of something that maybe you didn't plan it.
Mm-hmm.
Someone just thought of you, tagged you in it, and next thing
Yeah.
you know, you're talking about things from
Totally.
20 years ago. And those are the kinds of things that take initiative that is important at this time. That's maybe even more important at this time than others, because we don't have set times for people to be places.
Yeah.
We can
Totally.
set times for people to be places, but we don't.
Exactly. And again, just because this is your week and your kid is ready to rock this week, another family isn't yet.
Yep.
We're still actually really early in the process. Some families are dealing with loss of income. Some families are dealing with, lots of stuff beyond the loss of the sport, right?
Mm-hmm.
You touched on something that is really important. So we're talking about all of this interaction. We need to make sure that we're still keeping our kids safe. So
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to encourage parents and coaches to make sure that you're always getting consent from the parents. You have the rule of two still goes online as it does for face-to-face contact, right? Just to make sure that we keep sport safe for our
Mm-hmm.
youth as well.
Mm-hmm. Good point.
I,
Very good point.
yeah, I'm going to ask you another question here, Matt.
All right, wait.
Um, it was my child's final year with their team, and uh, did I read this already? Yes. My daughter is in a solo sport. She doesn't compete with a team. However, she is very goal driven and likes to constantly better herself and beat her records, etc. I have noticed she no longer has that drive in her, and she feels she doesn't have sport related goals to accomplish, and the cancellation of competitions means she has nothing to work towards for this year. How can I keep her engaged in the sport with the other members of her club and build new goals from home?
Mm-hmm. I think one of the most important characteristics of that question is uh, she is a very goal driven person. And
Mm-hmm.
just like when anything comes up that derails the ideal path, so injury, illness, deselection from a team, deselection from a program, missing a skill to advance to another level, like all of these things are the factors that are outside of our control. And if we have a goal directed individual, it's just a matter of taking something that they probably already do well and directing it another way, right? And so really starting to see the strength in the person. um, I think that it's important to be able to recognize too, and this is a big thing no matter what it is that the focus on competitions are a relatively small part of a season.
Mm-hmm.
We see the emphasis at early specialization sports. it's a little, looks like a little more because they're training a little more, but the
Mhm.
emphasis is actually quite low. Your early specialization sports, like, women's tennis, diving, gymnastics, like
Mhm.
there's 25 or 30 hours of training for, you know, 12 minutes of competition,
Mhm.
or 20 hours of training for 3 matches in a weekend. Like the relative importance of competition, I get it, is a wonderful focus, and it's awesome because it measures efficacy and gives us a sense of competence and confidence over time, and it gives us a sense of autonomy because we control ourselves in competition. There's so many factors there that are positive about competition, but we still don't control it. And
Mhm.
so when we remove competition and refocus, okay, so what is it that I do control, and take that goal directed person, take that asset, that strength in the person, and direct it towards what they can do, they'll find that that same mentality would be needed if there was an injury. If you're out for 3 months, it doesn't
Totally.
mean sitting on a couch. If
That's
you're out
right.
for 3 months, here's
That's a
your
good
physio
analogy.
exercises,
Yeah.
here's your nutrition, here are the things that you can control. I'm very goal directed and I can't play. Well, I'm very
Right.
goal directed and I can rehab. Well,
Right.
I'm very goal directed and I can train. I'm very goal directed and I can. So it helps the athlete recognize, like, we're not saying competition isn't important, but we are saying that its relative importance to the other factors that you do well is lower. And at this time, it's not something in your control. So it can be difficult to wrestle with. And that's, back to our grief conversation from a couple weeks ago. That's the wrestling match that often athletes are going through.
Yeah, totally. You know, also like let's say your organization has basically shut your doors, right? And you've got this outlier individual that just can't get access to the coaching anymore, and everything is
Mhm.
really actually stopped, and you're struggling with that.
Mhm.
There's also the provincial sport organizations, right, to reach out to, and certainly the Sport Connection can help with that. But also the Sport Connection, people like you and other coaches. So because I have a kid that's in a solo sport or in a sport that has ended, doesn't mean that they can't get the same type of engagement elsewhere. So, for that parent, maybe, reaching out and engaging in different ways and see if they can find somebody else that would be willing to spend time, because I feel like these types of people, like the home goal setting is great, and she's doing it or he's doing it on her own. I think it was female in this case,
Yep.
but um, sh- what she needs, I feel, is somebody saying, "Yeah, we're on the right track. Here's a periodization program, or here's something like that." Um, More like reaffirmation.
Mhm.
Hey, like
Mhm.
talking to somebody. So if it's not that coach in that specific sport, maybe there's another coach that is a coach, right? That can
Mhm.
help out with something like that. And I don't know what this person or who this person is or the contacts
Yep.
that they have, but certainly I know yourself or myself would be more than willing to have a chat and see if in our
Mhm.
network of coaches we can see and help with something like that as well.
Yeah, and I agree. I think one more sort of important element that comes along, and again, we don't see the sport or the kind of sport that they're in, but
Right.
I know that there's some sport specific language and worry about some of the sport skills that are involved, whether it's gymnastics or
Mm-hmm.
figure skating and those kinds of sports that have a sense that you're going to lose something if you're not doing it. And
Mm-hmm.
it's relative to riding a bike in a way. It's different memory, and so skill memory doesn't just disappear, it just doesn't get reinforced.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we look at a time where, say, I have an injury, oftentimes the worry is that everybody else is doing something and I'm not, and I'm going to lose or I'm going to fall behind, and there's some stress and some worry. Right now there's very few people except Tom Brady, who apparently found a field in Tampa to play football in, and then was kicked out promptly by a city worker. um,
Oh,
but
that's
so even Tom
so
Brady
and
can't go.
so. Right.
But we look at what an athlete can do, and we want to kind of work with that stress that an athlete might feel they'll lose their skills, and they won't. They're
Yeah.
not going to lose their skill. They're going to sharpen the skill and sharpen the spear
Mm-hmm.
when it comes time to get back to it. In the meantime, a focus on emotional regulation, a focus on training and strengthening the body, a focus on good healthy decisions, rest. There's so many
Nutrition.
factors
Yeah.
that could be really positive
Mm-hmm.
for the young athletes or for any athletes right now to really focus on the things that they can control. And that includes the emotional realm as well. So
Right. That's fantastic. Yeah, I think that's great. I think we basically covered all the questions. Certainly, when we post this, we'll ask if there's any follow-up questions and anything.
please,
And we're
yeah,
gonna post a link to your website, so if somebody wants to reach out and connect with you directly, they can do so.
yeah,
And I'm sure we're scheduled to chat again in the next week, two
yeah,
weeks, 2 weeks.
week or two, I think it
two
is. I don't
weeks
know my
anyway.
calendar up, but yeah,
Yeah. So what we'll tell people to watch for it, and Paige will create a
yeah,
nice little digital asset, and we'll send it out there and continue our conversations. But I think that was great. So lots of
definitely.
little nuggets for myself. Anyway, I don't know what the other people will be thinking, but always a pleasure to chat with you and pick your brain a little bit. I feel like I'm really lucky to have an insider, and yeah, I'm looking forward to already the next chat.
Well, thank you very much for hosting me again, Karna. I appreciate it. And if anybody has questions, please feel free to throw them my way.
Done and done. We'll make sure they
Right
know
on.
how to get a hold of you. All right. Enjoy
Absolutely.
the rest
Thanks,
of your
Karna.
day, Matt. Talk to you
You
later.
too. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.